Now, you may not believe this, and I'm not sure I do, but the film you just saw a coming attractions trailer for is one of Roger Ebert's favorite movies. Amazing. But I think it's pretty entertaining, too. Now, I can hear you asking, what's going on here? Have Ebert and Siskel gone bonkers? They're recommending trash. Well, that's not quite right. We're recommending on this show great trash, movies that we call guilty pleasures, movies that we're almost embarrassed to admit we love. And great trash, our guilty pleasures, is the topic we're going to be exploring this time on Sneak Previews Take 2, one of those special change of pace shows where Roger and I take a look at trends and issues in the movies. And this is Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
Across the aisle from me is Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune. Now, today's program is right out of left field. Gene and I are each going to pick 3 movies that we like, even if nobody else does. Now, you know the feeling. You go to the movies with a bunch of people, and afterwards everybody agrees about how totally lousy the movie was, and gee, you don't know, you kind of liked it. What we're going to do is look at scenes from some of our own secret favorites. And in addition to Inframan, I'm going to choose and defend The Fury and Last House on the Left.
I want to hear that. I'm going to confess to a real affection for Superfly, Emmanuel, and even The Greek Tycoon. The trashy pseudo-saga of Jackie Kennedy and Aristotle Onassis is played out by Jacqueline Bisset and Anthony Quinn, 2 talented actors portraying, I think, our fantasies of the high and mighty and beautiful. Jacqueline Bisset is a proud president's widow in the film who falls in love with Greek shipping baron Anthony Quinn, who gives his best performance, I think, since Zorba the Greek. In this scene, they argue on his island about her independence. That's just terrific. The whole appeal of a scene like that in a movie like this, Greek Tycoon, is that you really wonder, is that the way it happened between the real Kennedy and the real Onassis? That's all there is to it, but that's a lot. I feel like a gossip freak saying it, but I really enjoyed The Greek Tycoon, and not for just some screwy reason. I think it's genuinely a good film of its kind.
I want to tell you a story about the time that I saw this. I went at 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, the first day the movie opened, a matinee, right? Mostly women in the audience. And there's the moment when Anthony Quinn is explaining to Jacqueline Bisset the marriage contract, right? And he says, well, you have to tip doormen, you know, you have to have a hairdresser, $100,000 a month, right? Anything, God forbid, happens, we get divorced, $1 million a year for every year we're married. I looked around in the theater, right? And the audience was like this. It was just, they were agog. I mean, they were just absolutely fascinated by the movie, and I think that that's a valid reaction to a movie like this. We're interested in these kinds of people. We're interested in a voyeuristic experience, beautiful people, glamorous settings, things like that. If it's done well, if it's acted well and directed well, that's a valid reason for going to see a movie.
And I think acted well is very important. These are not 2 fly-by-night actors. Quinn is real good here, real powerful. He has a big range of emotions. Bisset is very interesting. She's proud. She's not a pushover. Very much drawn to them and to the fabulous settings. We're not lowering our critical standards. People may think we're laughing at this picture. It's real good of its kind.
And it's just too easy to dismiss and say, well, it's just National Enquirer.
They don't all have to be great works of art, meaning workings out of the world's mysteries. You know?
Okay, Gene, I'm glad you said that just as we go into my first guilty pleasure, which is a 1978 thriller that's a totally off-the-wall combination of extrasensory perception, science fiction, international espionage, and teenage romance. It was called The Fury, and it's about 2 kids who have mysterious paranormal powers that enable them to move objects simply by thinking about them. Now, Andrew Stevens is one of the kids with this power of telekinesis, and he's in an amusement park when the sight of a group of Arabs causes him to totally lose control. Now, some Arabs were responsible for the death of his father, and now, almost against his will, with his veins throbbing in his forehead, he uses his paranormal powers to gain revenge. There's no Arab energy crisis there. The energy in that scene is typical of the whole movie. Now, some people said The Fury was silly. I agree, it was silly. Some said it was preposterous. I agree, it was preposterous. But moment for moment and scene for scene, The Fury was terrific, silly, preposterous fun. It was good entertainment, and that's why I really don't feel guilty about liking it, as we go to the movies for all kinds of reasons, and the chance to enjoy a cheerfully outrageous adventure like this, filmed with great craftsmanship and style, is one of the reasons that we go.
Well, I'm already on record when the film came out 2 years ago as not being a big fan of it. As I look at that sequence, I can't deny at least that sequence is extremely well crafted. It builds up to a pitch, and then I love how he reduces it to that one bolt. All the energy is down to the one bolt.
I think
Very
we're
well
talking
done.
about a movie that's a very good example of its type. Now, if you remember, and I'm sure that you haven't been able to block this from your memory, our choice last year on this show as the worst movie of the year was something called The Medusa Touch.
Richard Burton.
Richard Burton, and the veins in his forehead were throbbing, and the plane went down, and so forth.
Terrible.
And it was stupefyingly stupid. It was just incredibly bad. Now, here is a movie that has a lot of grace and style. It's the same kind of film, and I liked it.
Very good. My next guilty pleasure may raise a few eyebrows. It's Emmanuelle, a tame but very erotic skin flick that was imported from France in 1975 by Columbia Pictures. What's mildly shocking about my choice is that rarely do you ever read in a film review, or in fact in any review of any work of art, that the critic was aroused sexually by it. You would think that critics never responded sexually to the material they write about. Well, I'm saying this critic is as human as the next guy or woman, and that, yes, Emmanuelle turned me on, especially the lead actress, Sylvia Crystal, who undergoes an education in sex during the film, an education that's played out amid lush settings in Thailand, and even with a total stranger on a night flight aboard an airplane. Well, no fear of flying there, and it gets a lot sexier. Now, there's a lot of super serious talk in the picture about us learning to forget marriage and to enjoy ourselves sexually whenever we want. That's okay, but that freedom lecture is not why I like Emmanuelle. I like Emmanuelle for its beautiful lovemaking scenes. I admit it, this film did exactly what it was designed to do, turn me on. That's an erotic scene. It's an erotic movie, a good-looking woman, a good-looking guy, and the tension of alone and a stranger.
Okay, Gene, since we're bearing our souls on this program, I have to admit it turned me on, too. I found it sexy, but what I really liked about it was it had a kind of elegance and a style to it, kind of a French touch that you don't get in a lot of the American X-rated pictures. It left a lot to the imagination. It suggested things rather than showing everything. And if there's one thing that, as a movie critic, I don't like in a lot of the X-rated pictures that it's part of our job to review, it's sometimes I feel like I'm a medical student. It's almost like I'm studying to be a gynecologist. I'm showing a great deal more human plumbing than I'm really interested in seeing. And this film had the kind of restraint, the elegant restraint that made it much more erotic for me.
Elegant is the right word for the picture. I think it's really beautiful, and it's a shame that people don't talk about what they really feel when they go to the movie sometimes, even critics, I think.
Oh, well, okay, now this is what we call a change of subject. This is a movie for the kids, and it's a Hong Kong science fiction thriller dubbed into English and named Inframan, and I discovered it at a kiddie matinee 3 years ago. And I go to a lot of kiddie matinees, by the way. It only took about 5 minutes of this movie to convince me that I was in the presence of a weird, curiously demented, but totally wonderful combination of science fiction, kung fu, and absurd superheroes. Believe me, Inframan makes Superman look like a slice of life. I was drawn to it because they're the kind of ads I've never been able to resist, those ads that say, see this and see that. See the impending destruction of planet Earth by mutant monsters led by the evil villainess, and, now get this, I love her name, Princess Dragon Mom. And now, here is Princess Mom in her subterranean headquarters ordering her monsters into action. You might call this film action-packed. Now, I was there on the kiddie matinee. I loved it. And the kids loved it, too, as a matter of fact. Inframan was produced by Hong Kong's leading sultans of schlock, two brothers named Run Run Shaw and Run Me Shaw, and this time they really outran themselves. The special effects are outrageous. The plot is an unbelievable combination of low camp and high comedy. I loved it. I seriously think the movie has a future as a midnight cult classic.
I'm sure you're right. What I like about that sequence is that this film doesn't do what most action pictures do that's wrong. Most action pictures feel some need to interrupt themselves and try and get serious and have dialogue passages with the character. Hey, when we go to a picture like that, we don't want to know who the people are. We want thrills. We want action, sparks, flames, people jumping. There you had everything in that sequence, enough for 2 pictures.
That's why Inframan is so great. There's a scene in there, for example, the big dialogue scene. They hardly talk at all. The professor has left science headquarters. He has gone to talk to the United Nations. Things are bad. Mountains have fallen apart to reveal the forms of extinct dinosaurs that are going to attack us. The San Andreas Fault has gone around the earth and opened up. School buses full of kids have fallen in. Hong Kong is in flames. Princess Dragon Mom has unleashed the mutant men upon humanity, and the professor says, gentlemen, things are so bad, they are the worst they ever have been.
I think you sold a few thousand tickets to that movie. Well, having admitted to enjoying the gossip about Jackie Kennedy and the Greek tycoon and the sex thrills of Emmanuelle, I will now take on an even less popular cause. I happen to like the movie Superfly. Back in 1972, Superfly was, I think, unfairly mislabeled as a black exploitation picture. You know, one of those crude, ghetto-based, hate-whitey films that offer black children only pimps, prostitutes, and drug pushers as role models. Well, there were a lot of films like that being made in the early 70s, but Superfly, in my opinion, wasn't one of them. It was a cut above all that. Superfly was mainly a very gentle and caring picture about a drug pusher trapped in a dangerous world he wants to escape. Ron O'Neal, in a good performance, played the drug dealer known as Superfly who wants to make one last big drug sale before he calls it quits. He approaches the owner of a ghetto nightclub, sort of a father figure to him, for help in obtaining cocaine. In that scene and in those photographs, every minute of this film, I think we feel it's really real. 30 years ago, I guess Superfly's story might have been played by Humphrey Bogart or John Garfield, and today we'd probably be calling that picture a minor masterpiece. But Superfly was different. It was black, and the movie was dismissed by most critics as being a bad film about a bad guy doing bad things. But for me, it had genuine power and a city vitality that made it exciting and human and real. And, you know, I think it's just because they mentioned drugs that this film got dumped on and thrown away.
Well, that and also the fact that when it came out, it was surrounded by dozens of black exploitation films, which were frankly bad. And with some of them, you felt that they were intended to be bad, that nobody really cared if they were good or not. And this one got lost in the shuffle. It was really a lot better than that. Just looking at that scene, the acting in that scene, you don't feel that these are actors who are saying, how am I going to say my dialogue, or how am I going to come across here? They're really there. It's level one reality. You really feel a lot of acting there. I wonder why Ron O'Neal didn't have more of a movie career.
I don't know. He could have been strutting in that role. A lot of people think he was strutting in that role. Very real. Good film.
Right. I'm very much in agreement. Now we come to our third, or to my third and last guilty pleasure, Last House on the Left, which I have to say is an extremely violent and unsavory thriller that came out in the early 1970s, was attacked or dismissed by almost every critic I know of. If I remember correctly, Gene, you said that it was moral, disgusting, and depraved.
Those were some of my kinder remarks.
Okay. And yet I felt the movie had an unusual power and impact. 1973, at a time when movie violence was so commonplace that we hardly even noticed it, here was a movie with a genuine visceral power to shock, a movie in which the violence was as graphic and real so that we just couldn't dismiss it as only a movie. Last House on the Left is about two teenage girls who are kidnapped by a gang of sadistic killers. One of the girls escapes, but she doesn't get very far. We didn't have to show you that scene, but we did to make a point. Every week in this country on primetime television, there are scores of stabbings, shootings, gougings, violent murders. And somehow they never touch us, or at least they never really touch me, but this movie does. And that scene goes on to make it get a lot worse. The girl is stabbed in the back, and the look on her face will never leave me. And that's an example of the crude but very effective power that Last House on the Left had to really shock and startle us. And in its seriousness, its relentlessly despairing view of human nature, the raw power of its images, Last House on the Left was a more powerful and skillful film than a lot of the 70s more respectable thrillers. It didn't compromise.
Well, it certainly didn't change tones. It was consistent, I'll grant you that. In my review, I dumped all over the picture. I hated it.
Yeah,
I thought it luxuriated in its violence and was sort of sick in its own way for that reason. At the same time, I hear you now clearer than I heard you when you reviewed it years ago, because what you seem to be saying is just what I got through saying with Superfly, which is that it's an unsavory subject, drug pushing in one case, here a stabbing rapist, and yet it's treated real and done well. Does that make it a bad movie? A rotten subject, but done well. I don't think it's necessarily a bad movie.
Here's an example of that where people say because the subject is bad, the movie is bad. This movie, Last House on the Left, curiously enough, from beginning to end, is a scene-by-scene remake of The Virgin Spring by Ingmar Bergman, one of the great films of 1958. And that film is, I think, officially considered to be art. I certainly consider it to be a very good film. This film is often, people dismiss it as garbage. Well, it's the same subject. So you get into a very tricky shadow area there.
Okay, I accept your intellectual argument. I think this specific case it may be garbage.
Okay.
We disagree. Okay. At any rate, let's take another look now at our guilty pleasures so you can make sure you heard us right. I like The Greek Tycoon, a deliciously gossipy look into the rich and powerful worlds of Jacqueline Kennedy and Aristotle Onassis. I also liked Emmanuelle, one of the few sex films that is genuinely erotic, and Superfly, which I think has been unfairly labeled a black exploitation picture. Let's face it, these characters exist. We pass them by in the street every day. Superfly made them come alive.
Okay, now I'd like to recap my guilty pleasures. The Fury was an entertaining combination of extrasensory perception, international espionage, and teenage romance. Inframan was the outrageous Hong Kong science fiction extravaganza with a bionic superhero doing battle with the unforgettable Princess Dragon Mom. And Last House on the Left was the violent, cynical, disturbingly effective modern thriller.
Well, okay. You know, we've called this show Guilty Pleasures because the movies we've recommended here are not generally thought of as the kind of classy, marvelous films that film critics typically praise. So that's why the phrase Guilty Pleasure, which was originated, as you know, by Film Comment magazine, which regularly features the guilty pleasures of all different kinds of critics. But in reality, you know, I'm not so sure that we really feel guilty about these films we've been talking about. They might be schlocky to some people. They might be scandalous to others, psychopathic to others, to the casual observer, that is. But to us, I think these movies, I think we really believe this, they have genuine merit.
Yeah, I think we're touching here on the kind of experience that a lot of moviegoers have, where they go to a movie and everybody else is laughing at it or walking out on it, and you're sitting there and you're saying, hey, wait a minute, I like it. There's something in this movie that speaks to me or that I see in it. And that kind of individual pleasure is one of the good reasons to go to a movie, I think.
I agree.
And that's it for this show. Join us next week on Sneak Previews, and until then, We'll see you at the movies.